When I started the firm, I had this dream of being able to help our clients' businesses grow and become more profitable. And I didn't really have a clear direction on how to do that. And so that's been part of just figuring out who we are and figuring out who our ideal clients are. So we're working with the businesses that really want to grow and see the value in the consultation and learning how to grow.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a good one. Our returning guest is the owner of Royer Accounting, based out in British Columbia, Canada. Andrew Royer, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me here, Michael. Glad to be back.
It's great to have you. And Andrew, we're going to do something today where we're going to take a deep dive into your business journey and look at it in stages. Are you game?
I'm game. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So you've been on the podcast before, but let's help our listener understand, what did your career and life look like before you started your business?
Yeah, so I went down, it's a bit of a long story. So I started off, I've always wanted to run my own business, and I tried to get the courage by talking to other people, and those other people convinced me to go down the career path first. I was interested in computers, so I ended up doing software development for about 13 years and ended up writing accounting software. I remember in school taking one of my accounting courses, thinking if I wasn't going to be a software developer, I could see myself doing this. And then so around 2008, when the markets dropped, I didn't have my degree. I decided to go back and get a degree, and I decided to try something different. So I decided to go into accounting, and then thankfully ended up at the largest accounting firm in Canada, which is a great place to learn accounting for sure. And I loved it. I loved it there. So that's how my career started going down that path. But then, just with working in a big firm and a growing family, I was just finding it more and more difficult to keep that up, especially with all the course load on top of that, with young kids and course and work. And
I can imagine. And you've got a big family.
I do. Well, so at the time I was making the switch, we were pregnant with our third boy. So right now we have, I got 4 young kids. My oldest is 8 and my youngest is 3. So when our third was coming due, I was doing the math and thinking with the cost of childcare and, after taxes, I was making about $500 a month. And so that's actually what ended up getting me starting my own business. With somebody approached me and said they were looking for a bookkeeper, and I just asked them, I said, would you be willing to pay $500 a month? And so they said yes, and so I quit the job so that I could focus on my school and spend some time with my family.
Oh, remarkable. And what was that leap like when you quit your job and you took this leap? That must have been an experience.
It was a little scary. It wasn't too bad because, like I said, I wasn't really giving anything up. I was working a lot less. I was able to focus on my school, and it just seemed like a natural transition. I would have only been bringing home about $500, and so there was no real change in income. But obviously, with a growing family, I wasn't going to be able to live off of that $500 for very long.
Mm. And how was obviously you have your family, you have your wife, how was that with making this decision to go it on alone? Was your wife all like, hey, yeah, go do it? Or was it a challenge? Did she experience fear?
I think she was okay. I mean, she's always been fearful of entrepreneurial adventures, and she's known since she met me that I always had that bit of that entrepreneurial bug, but she's encouraged me to keep working, and she wanted that stable job. That's actually what caused me to go. I was initially talking to her about starting my own business because I wasn't happy in 2008, I wasn't happy doing what I was doing anymore. So we kind of compromised in that she wanted me to, if I was going to start my own business, she wanted me to get something where I would have that degree to fall back on. So that's kind of what pushed me down that accounting path. But when it came to this transition, she again just saw, it just wasn't tenable with us, with the family, and trying to do all the schoolwork. And really, again, it just kind of worked out. This was probably the easiest part of my entrepreneurial journey, was to just getting started. But it wasn't until as the business slowly started to pick up, and I was at that phase between, I can't keep the kids at home and do all this work, but I wasn't making enough to send them back to daycare. That's when it started to become a bit of a challenge. And, she started getting more concerned. But at that point, it was like we were already heading down that path. So there was no real turning back.
So when you, in terms of starting your business, two-part question. First part is, what do you feel was essential for you to have done in starting up your business? And then the second part would be, what would you have wished you would have done differently?
Yeah, so what I love that we did, I ended up doing the pure bookkeeping system. So it got us the systems right away. So I realized when I needed to grow the business, I was going to have to do it pretty quickly, and I didn't have time to sit down and figure all these systems out on my own.
And I was gonna say, I remember actually meeting you, and you were literally days, hours, maybe away from having your third. I thought it was your fourth at that time, but I guess it was your third child at that time. So I do remember that moment. I couldn't remember if it was your third on the way or your fourth on the way, but I guess it was your third.
To be honest with you, I can't remember either.
When you have four, you probably can't remember a lot of stuff. I'm thinking.
That might have actually been my fourth.
Yeah, something tells me it is, but I can see with two. I have two, and I can't imagine doubling that. I wouldn't be able to remember my own name. I think so. So pros of what you did is getting systems. You didn't have the time, obviously, to get that set up. So you got systems. And what about things that you wish you would have done differently?
Well, one thing I did do is I did the value pricing, which I still feel like was the right thing to do, but pricing has always been a challenge, and it's kind of hard to start with the pricing when you actually have no idea how long things would take. I wish I had taken, even with the value pricing, I wish I had tracked my time a lot better. So I think one of the issues is I went right with the value pricing, and then I had no idea how long things were taking me. So then when I did eventually hire somebody on, I had no way of telling them how long it took me to do it. So that I wish I had tracked that a lot better right at the beginning, because that would have just made my life a lot easier down the road.
And has that now straightened out? Do you have that handled, or is it still something that you're working through?
That's the biggest thing that I'm actually focused on right now, because I'm jumping ahead a bit here, but now that we're really starting to grow, I really need to start focusing on those efficiencies before we get any bigger. And I need to try and monitor the times of my staff and try and make sure that things are where they need to be, that my pricing's where I feel pretty confident with the pricing, but I need to get back and look at the efficiencies and figure out how to make things run faster and smoother without me.
Excellent. Well, maybe let's talk about, we'll dig deeper into that, but let's talk about, and I like that point around, some of the foundations is knowing benchmarking, knowing how long it takes you to do something, an interesting point. Now, tell us about growing your business. I mean, you talked about the first client. It's like, hey, would you pay me $500 a month? That was your first client. What steps did you take to grow from there?
So I reached out to friends and family, which some of those ended up working out well. Some of them ended up being a bit challenging. Man, that's where I think most people have to start. But it wasn't until I started to get the referrals from accountants. And I just actually ran into an accountant I used to know when we was at a grocery store, and I talked to him, and that led to that was a big breakthrough in our growth. And so those clients and then other referrals coming in helped us to grow quite a bit. And one of the issues that I was having actually at that time is I lived in the house that we bought. It was a fixer-upper, and I didn't really want clients coming into my house to see that, and I didn't want any employees to come in. So one of the issues that I ran into as we were growing was trying to meet with clients. I would end up, I'd have to drive out and meet them at a Starbucks, which is not the most secure or not the most private setting. And it would take me time to get there and time to get back. And then if they were late or didn't show up, there could be potentially 2 hours of my day would just disappear with doing that. And as I was getting busier, that just wasn't sustainable. That was a bit of an issue that I started to run into at that point.
Very interesting. And how long did that go on before you did something about it?
Well, I think it probably went on about a year. And then what I ended up doing is I rented an office space, so a shared office space. So I was able to meet clients there, which was great for the time. That was both a smart move and a bit of a dumb move. And it was great for my time savings, and I had a really nice place to be able to bring clients to, and a receptionist here, and so all that was great. But it certainly had a huge increase in my costs, and there's probably cheaper ways that I could have gone about doing that.
If you had to do it all over again, what do you think you'd do, looking back?
Well, I think what I would do, so what I ended up doing is I'm working at, like a shared office space, and you can rent spaces here, but they also have the ability, they have like open working areas that you can work at. And then you have offices that you can rent. So for a much cheaper, so rather than spending, say, $1,900 a month on a big office space, I could spend a few $100s a month, have access to the space, and then spend about, if a client's coming in, I can rent an office for an hour at $25. So that would have been a significant savings. It would have had all the same benefits that I'm having without all the extra cost.
Great tip. So looking for our listeners, looking for a shared flexible space where you can ramp up, down, keep your costs contained and predictable, and then grow into the bigger office.
Right. And that was, so one of the issues at that point was, so I knew I was getting busier and I knew I needed to hire, and I started to focus on increasing the top line revenue. And so that's a bit of a trap that I fell into as well. You start focusing on the wrong number, because ultimately it's not how much you earn, it's how much you get to keep. And so focusing on that top line revenue made me so if I get this office, I can increase my revenue. I started making bad decisions based on that. And I think if I had to do it over again too, I would just focus on how much profit I was making, how could it be the most profitable and still, do this growth.
Right. So when you say you made mistakes, what mistakes? Can you give me an example?
Well, the office space is a big one. It's a huge cost that still sits in my profit and loss statement. Mm-hmm. Also, the other thing is, so when you're hiring, you're thinking if you're going to be spending money on an employee, you want to make sure that employee is bringing you in income. And I think that it's a bit of a mistake as well, because as the owner of the company, you are the best employee that the company has. And sometimes we forget that as an entrepreneur. And I think what would have made more sense would have been, as I was getting busier, what are the things that I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing that aren't bringing in money, and then outsourcing that work. So I think starting off with an office administrator probably would have been more beneficial for me and would have allowed us to bring in more money.
Mm. So just opening up more time for you versus hoping someone's going to actually be able to do some of the business generation stuff you were doing.
Right. Yeah. You hire somebody and you think that they're going to be just as good as you are. Mm. Right. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of, I have great staff now, so I'm not putting them down in any means, but it's generally, as the owner, you're going to be working longer hours. You have the knowledge, which is why you started it in the first place. And so hiring somebody and trying to teach them what you know and how to do things the way that you want them done, it's just obviously they're not going to be able to do them the same way you would ever, and certainly not as quickly as you'd like them to.
It's a great point. And I have friends that own businesses and they think they're disappointed and disenfranchised with their staff because they expect them to think like them, which is a pitfall and a trap. I think that it can be damaging, because you're absolutely right. You're going to think about your business in a totally different way because you're the owner, and all sorts of components of the way you think about it, to expect them to treat it like they own the business and think like you would be disappointing because the expectation would not be fulfilled.
Yeah, exactly.
Great one. What other mistakes did you think back and say, I really shouldn't have made that or done that?
Well, I did. One of the things I was doing in that my desperation, as we were getting busier, I tried to postpone hiring, trying to keep the money, and just realized, okay, so I need to hire somebody, and I started going through the process of trying to find somebody, and I had a system to hire the right person, but it just became, I wasn't getting the candidates that I was hoping for. So in a hurry to, try and offload this work, I decided to skip a couple of steps or overlook, put my thumb on the scale, so to speak, and in order to get somebody in. And so one of the things in my the test that I did for my first hire, I discovered that there were some communication issues, but I figured I'll just deal with that later. And then at the end of 3 months, I had to let her go. And surprise, surprise, we were having communication issues. Yeah, so it was just, being in a hurry to hire, I guess, was a bit of another mistake. I took my time after that. I've got 2 great employees since then.
And would you say that you did when you were hiring your great employees, what was different the next go round? What do you think enabled you to build up your team in this way?
Well, I followed the system that I had set out in the first place, and I just took a little more. I ended up offering a little bit more money in order to get the person that I wanted as well. But I still only had one great candidate, which is the one that I hired. And it was still a challenge to try and find somebody, but I just knew I'd be worse off trying to rush it and take one of the other candidates and trying to make it work. And so I just waited until the right person came.
That's very interesting. And so with your system, looking back on the hiring, what is it about the system that has you go, this is what this system does for me, where you say, this is the person that I'm going to hire? Well,
yeah, so the point of the system is to see how they actually work. And it's not strictly like just a pass-fail. I mean, you get an idea of how they communicate, how they problem solve. So it's very revealing. And so when, like I said, so the first time through, I noticed that like she didn't ask any questions and she made a whole bunch of mistakes. But I'm like, okay, well, she did the work that she did it well. But other than, the things that there's no way that she could have known the answer without talking to me, and she just refused to talk to me. So that was very revealing. After I hired her, that was the exact same thing that happened while she was working. So just following that system allowed me to, be able to get a sense of how they work. And then it was, and it was the same thing for the person I did hire. I mean, she asked the right questions. She did the work well, and that's continued on after I've hired her.
You're not the first person that's skipped a couple of steps. I've heard it many times, and also in sales, they call it happy ears, right? You like you say, put your thumb on the scale. You skip a step because you want to get the end result and get yourself out of whatever situation. You're doing it for a reason. You left it longer than you thought you should, and so you put even more pressure on yourself. So it's a natural trap, but costly trap. Maybe talk a little bit. Have you identified what those costs were to your business by skipping a couple of those steps?
Well, I think it was it's just set me back. I mean, at least the 3 months, and then the time that it took me to find somebody else. Thankfully, we didn't mess up with any clients or anything. There was no lasting damage, thankfully, but it was just more the frustrations, and it took us longer to catch up. And once, I waited a little bit longer. To hire the right person, and then we're now pretty much caught up. I mean, I think we've got one client left that is a little bit behind, but otherwise we're on top of all of our clients on the month-to-month basis, and we're able to do that just by having a solid team now. And I think if I had waited a little bit longer and hired the right person to begin with, we'd be in a little bit better position today. We'd be 6 months ahead, I think, right now.
Remarkable and great lessons for anyone that's thinking about hiring is slow it down to speed it up, and make the best possible decision and take your time, because it's a big step. It's a big step. It's a critical component of the business. So thank you for sharing that. Now, tell me a little bit. I know you work with Lisa Campbell and have had some mentorship, and you've been working with other successful bookkeeping business owners from across North America. I'm really curious how that looked in terms of the stage of your business, when that became something that would have been of value to you.
Yeah, I think right now, so as I'm going through that growth stage and trying to scale the business up, certainly with Lisa's help, it's been beneficial in order to get those systems in place, in order to be able to pass more on to the employees and get more off my plate. That's a major benefit that I got getting working with her, and just obviously the great friendships just in that group as well has been amazing.
Oh, fantastic. Now, you did mention that you had the Pure Bookkeeping system, and you got these systems, and now tell us a little bit about that journey, because having systems, you talked about time. I don't have all the time to build these systems out, but even having all of the Pure Bookkeeping systems, you still have to have the time to implement them, to collect the data, to put them in place, to make sure that they're all running for yourself. There must have been some challenges and obstacles going through all of that. How did that all go?
Yeah, there certainly was. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to get it into an electronic system. So trying to get that set up so we ended up using Jetpack, because there was that integration with the Pure Bookkeeping system in Jetpack, and getting that set up. But it was still a challenge for each client has its own little differences, and each industry has its own little differences. So it's nice to have the framework of those procedures set up out of the gate. But we definitely did have to do a lot of tweaking and had to do some explanations for our staff as well. So just creating videos and making sure that was well understood, and making sure that they're actually being followed, because just because you give the procedures to the staff doesn't necessarily mean that they're following them, or at least following them the way that you think they should. That's
right. Garbage in, garbage out.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've been working at that. That's been in place. And it sounds like you've gotten your team to a place where they know what to do, they know how to do it, and they know when they've done a good job of it. And you're using Jetpack to manage the workflow. In terms of your growth, the growth of getting to where you are currently in your business, anything else that you think back and think, okay, this was a really good thing that we did, or this was, hey, I would have maybe done that differently?
The growth phase was definitely full of the most challenges, but I don't know that I would have done anything differently. I think I've heard a lot of people at this stage say, they wouldn't work with everybody. Like every business that starts off, you tend to just take on whoever you can, because you have bills to pay. And then looking back, you want to say, well, I wish I had identified my ideal target, client, and started with them. I do think we're starting to figure that out now, or I shouldn't say starting to. I think we've got a clear picture of who our ideal clients are now and who we are now. But I don't know that I would have done that any differently, because we had to go through that process to figure out who they were and who we were. And so I'm not going to say that, I wish we had identified that sooner. Obviously that would have been nice, but I think we had to go through that process to figure that out.
It's a good point, and I think it's giving our listeners who maybe haven't figured it out yet some permission to do that. How can you know what you're going to like working with, or who you're going to like working with, until you've worked with them? And that's part of becoming a seasoned at anything. It's experiential, right? You do things, you learn what works, what doesn't work, what you like, dislike, where you think you have strengths and weaknesses, and you figure it out over time. Obviously, you also worked in a big firm. You got lots of learnings there. You bring all of those learnings from the past into your business. So, it's good to know that, hey, what we're trying to figure out is our ideal client, and we're going to have to work with some non-ideal clients likely to figure out what that finally looks like in the end. So I like that you've opened that up and mentioned that, because there is a lot of talk about that. And whilst you want to educate yourself about, well, how would I find my ideal client, you do need to go out there and explore that.
Mm-hmm.
So Andrew, in terms of where you're going, the next stage of your business, what does the future look like for you?
Well, I'm pretty excited about the future because we're now a certified profit first professional firm. When I started the firm, I had this dream of being able to help our clients' businesses grow and become more profitable. And I didn't really have a clear direction on how to do that. And so that's been part of just figuring out who we are and figuring out who our ideal clients are. So we're working with the businesses that really want to grow and see the value in the consultation and learning how to grow. And I just need to, I'm focusing on those efficiencies like I talked about now. And once we get that going humming along a little bit better, then I think we should be able to grow quite quickly and be able to help a lot of businesses become more profitable.
Oh, that's excellent. So you're really at the point now where you can start to live into your vision of helping business owners, which I always love hearing on the podcast and sharing with others and reminding, that's what many people are in this business to do, is to be able to help business owners and make a great living doing it. I will ask on the efficiency side, if there was one or two areas that you're really focused on right now to bring a lift in your efficiencies, what are those?
To be honest, I'm right at the beginning phases of it. So the first step was just identifying what the targets should be and then which clients are falling short of those targets. And then, the next step is going to be looking at the worst of those and then identifying where the blocks are. Like, what is it that's causing it to take so long? Mm. But I'm still at the beginning stages. I don't actually know what that is, whether it's the receipt capture stage or I don't know at this point.
Okay, very cool. We'll learn about that maybe in the next episode we do with you down the track.
That sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely. So my last question is just, looking back at this journey, what was the pivotal moments or the biggest pivotal moments or the biggest breakthrough moments in your journey?
I think, the biggest thing was the starting off with the peer bookkeeping system was obviously huge. The transitioning with the Lisa Campbell's program to just help systematize and grow that business, and then discovering just the profit first system and becoming certified in that. I think those are probably the three biggest pivot points.
Beautiful. Well, it's thank you for sharing that. And Andrew, if people wanted to learn more about your business and learn more about you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, you go to our website, royeraccounting.ca.
Beautiful.
Probably the best place to go.
Beautiful. And we will have that link in the show notes. And Andrew, I want to thank you on behalf of all of our listeners for coming on the show and sharing your journey with us. It's extremely valuable, and I know it will be inspirational to so many out there. I wish you the best in the growth of your business.
All right, thank you very much. My pleasure.
Beautiful. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.